All right. So everybody that's listening, we thank you so much for listening, whether it's on the radio or on the podcast. Podcasting people, please like, subscribe, and share. We have a special guest. He's running in New York 3 against, and everybody knows this guy, unfortunately, for bad things, George Santos, but he's running. And I've learned a lot about this guy that's running. We're going to talk about him in just a second. It's Kellen Curry, and he has a lot of values that I believe I personally have. He's a veteran. He's a former VP at JP Morgan. And again, as I stated earlier, he's running for Congress in New York 3. Kellen, thanks so much for coming on the program today. Greatly appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a wild ride. We've been at it for about 4 months now, and I know we've been trying to get this scheduled, and I truly appreciate your flexibility and just honored and happy to be here with you and your audience today.
Well, Kellen, we have a lot of listeners and viewers from New York and the Long Island area, so I know that's your stomping ground. So they'll be grateful to hear a lot of your views in this. I just kind of gave a very small, brief synopsis about who you are and what you've done in the past. Anything you'd like to add on to the viewers and the listeners?
Well, sure. I will tell you that I'm first and foremost the son of public servants. You know, Dad wore the uniform of our country. He was a naval officer. Mom is a decades long federal civil servant at Tinker Air Force Base. Both of them worked there. It's located right outside of Oklahoma City. So I grew up on that base or being, transported back and forth, watching mom and dad do their thing, and always wanted to have my own story of service and was happy to do that by going to the Air Force Academy and truly created, that experience, and then served 8 years in the Air Force, 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and then eventually made my way to New York by way of business school, and then at JP Morgan for a number of years. And so it's a quintessential kind of New York story for me. I never thought this small town kid from Oklahoma would be, running for Congress here in New York, but I'm here by choice and not by birth, like so many New Yorkers, because this is just an amazing place to live and experience life. And I look forward to getting back into public service in this way and serving my new community here in New York.
Well, we need more people like you that served in the military that know what leadership means to serve as leaders of our country. So I'm grateful for you to run, and hopefully, we do hope you win that office. In general, I'm speaking for myself personally. We hope the viewers listening do vote for you in general. Just to go a little bit more in depth about the run for Congress. You've done so many things in 37 years in being in the military, working at, JP Morgan for many years. What made you want to go into that cesspool and run for Congress? Because it really is a cesspool in Washington, unfortunately.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was not an easy decision for sure. You certainly make a lot of sacrifices to do this and to run for Congress and to leave your job and to do it full time and to do it right. And I felt like that's what I needed to do to make this as successful as possible. But I'll tell you, the reason why I got into the race has so much to do with my military service and serving in Afghanistan and having classmates from the Air Force Academy who went there that did not come back home, and then me coming back home and seeing the disaster of the withdrawal and the 13 Marines that we lost there, and the fact that right here in our own backyard we have leadership that is simply not worthy of the service and sacrifice of our veterans, but the American people writ large. And we can do better, and we deserve better. We deserve nothing but the best leadership that our country has to provide. And so that's so much of what this campaign is about. So it's an honor to be back in the public service. Politics is new, but I'm a third generation veteran, and so service is not.
Again, for people listening, Kellen Curry, he's running for New York 3 for Congress. Kellen, as we keep going into the interview, can you tell us, you've talked to many people for the past 4 months, walking around your district, speaking to people in subways, everywhere in the kitchen sink in general. Tell us what they're telling you as far as issues important to them, because there's a lot on the plate of all Americans in general, not just in New York.
Absolutely. It's interesting because folks don't even really want to talk about Santos. They want to talk about the issues. They want to know how I'm thinking about the issues, what kind of congressman I'm going to be. One of the things that comes up is constituency services. And I know that doesn't sound sexy and all that stuff, but right now, understand none of that stuff is getting done. And we have a large population of veterans, of senior citizens, of immigrant families who need help and support in navigating the federal agencies. And unfortunately, the sitting congressman is just absent. And ethically, ethics rules prevent other congressional members from taking on those casework or that caseload. And so it's just not getting done. And people want to engage me about my time in federal service. I spent years as a federal procurement officer guiding businesses large and small through the federal procurement process to buy cybersecurity weapon systems. Obviously, I come from a family of federal civil servants, so I know how the federal government works. I look forward to achieving what I call the gold standard of constituency services here in our district. The other issue that people want to talk about is affordability, especially on Long Island. It's extremely expensive to live here. There are some things that we can do on a federal level to ease the burden on Long Island families. We have to continue to keep pushing for the removal, or at least some sort of moderating policy on the cap that was placed on the deductions for state and local taxes. But we also have to look at the federal poverty level and how that is being calculated. Right now, for a family of four, it's only $30,000 is what you have to is the max you can be making to get federal resources in terms of food stamps and things like that. And so right now we want to raise that. We want to make sure that that number is reflective not only of inflation but of regional economies and geographic economies, because we know on Long Island that number is closer to $55,000. And so right now, there's a lot of families who are suffering from food insecurity, who are not getting the help that they need to make ends meet and to put food on the table. And so these are some of the kitchen table issues that I'm coming into contact with, and people want to know what I'm going to do about it, how I'm going to address it. And so those are just some of the issues. The other issue that we've been talking about quite a bit is the Merchant Marine Academy, which is located right here in our district. It needs the campus needs to be rebuilt. We need to be pushing through more sea lift officers, especially as we think about the fight in the South China Sea against China. And so that's going to be a big part of our legislative priorities, is pushing through about $1 billion infrastructure package to rebuild the campus so that institution, which is a crown jewel of the district, can realize its full potential.
Kellen, I want to kick around some issues and take some stabs at some of these issues that are important to people in the district, but again, important to Americans all around the country in general. Speaking about the Ukraine war, obviously you served in the military for quite a few years, obviously in Afghanistan. As far as Ukraine goes, we see people like President Trump, Ron DeSantis, who also served in the military, saying that, they're against the war. As a person running for Congress, a person that served in the military, what is your opinion on this war, and what should we do if you do get elected in Congress? What would you do rather?
Absolutely. One of our best strengths for this country is the alliances that we have across the world. The fact that an American president can pick up the phone and talk to almost anybody and get a receptive response on the other end is a tremendous power. It's a tremendous source of soft power for our country. And so we have to stand with our allies. We have to stand with Israel. We have to stand with NATO, with Ukraine, especially right now in their fight against Russia's war of aggression. So I support our efforts in making sure that happens. That we give our friends in Ukraine as much support as we can. Understand that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapon capability a long time ago to fall underneath the American umbrella. And so we've made commitments to Ukraine. We've made commitments to our allies around the world. It's tremendously important that we demonstrate our resolve to stand by our commitments, to stand with our allies. It has tremendous effects not only for Ukraine, but also for Taiwan. It's important that China knows that America is willing to stand by its commitments. And so I support the war effort in Ukraine that America is making a contribution to.
What about the money going to Ukraine? We're seeing people on the left and the right that are worried about this. We already have a huge budget deficit. This is going back to the Bush administration, Obama, Trump, and obviously Biden now. and the budget deficit is out of control. We're seeing people on the left and right, as I just stated, saying that we went from 2 wars under Bush and now we're into 7. There's cuts that are, being pushed by Republicans and Democrats, SNAP, disability, but there's never any push on the military as far as cuts, whether it's bases. I agree with you. Ronald Reagan said that we need to have a strong defense. I'm for a strong defense, but I'm very worried also about this bloated military budget that, continuously goes on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. If you look at our military budget, it's getting closer and closer to $1 trillion. And you have to ask yourself, is the American people going to accept a eventual, $1 trillion military budget? And so we've got to think seriously about how we allocate money, how we spend money, certainly what our priorities are. And we've got some tremendous decisions coming up. You think about the Navy, for example. Are we going to have a 300 ship Navy, a 400 ship Navy, or 500 ship Navy? I mean, there are different competing proposals, and there's a number of decision points like that across the service branches that we've got to make a decision on that's going to impact our budget. But at the end of the day, we know that freedom isn't free. We know that it comes with a price tag, and so that's got to be a commitment that we remain resolved about. I think the other thing that we have to do, and this is something that Trump was very much vocal about, was the commitment that NATO countries are making as far as their contribution to NATO and to some of our alliances. We have to make sure that our European allies are pulling their weight to take some of the pressure off the American taxpayer to fund, the security essentially of other countries. And so we can't allow essentially, Europeans to subsidize their own cost of defense by the American taxpayer.
Because we do talk about low taxes. Obviously, we all want to keep the taxes low, but besides the military and all these other economic programs that have been passed by the Biden administration, it comes a point where, as we just spoke about, the budget deficit is out of control. Where are we going to keep getting that money? If we talk about keeping low taxes, how do you do that? And you keep spending on the military and all these social programs. Eventually, we're going to have to come to a place and say enough is enough. We're going to have to make some cuts everywhere. We saw that with the sequestration with the Obama administration back at that time. And obviously, that's somewhat gone away. I do want to get into some more topics. You brought up a little earlier, Kellen, about China. We're seeing this alliance between China, Russia, Saudi Arabia is jumping in, Brazil. They call it the BRICS now. You were in the military. I'm somebody that's very worried about this alliance. And it seems like it is getting stronger due to the Ukraine war. How do we stick up for Ukraine and also kind of, deter that alliance with China and Russia and obviously keep under control Saudi Arabia and these other countries? India also is involved in this too.
Yeah, yeah. We have to do a better job of exporting American values. That's one thing that traditionally we have always done. We have to be able to put up alongside the vision that China wants for the world, which is more authoritarianism, more taking away the rights of people, and we have to place alongside that a contrasting vision of what life should be like for human beings, which is one where freedom reigns, where the government does not exalt itself over the liberties of its citizens. And so I think you're seeing some of that happen right now. I mean, just this week, Italy, in 2019, Italy actually joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, and to the surprise of many other G7 countries. They were the first one to do that. But recently, they have started taking steps to affirmatively get out of the Belt and Road Initiative. So I don't think it's necessarily a trajectory of China and the BRICS countries consolidating more and more parts of the world. There is some pullback, and it's starting to, and we need to lean into that pullback, and we need to be vocal about why a country like Italy, first got in, and then now is kind of seeing what it was all about, and now they're getting out. And so I think you're going to see more of that. And some of the African countries are getting wiser about the fact that, China, they don't offer great transparency. They don't offer great terms in terms of the loans that they give these countries to make these infrastructure projects. It's very predatory, if you will. So over time, I think people countries are beginning to understand the realities of what China is all about. And I think we have to lean into that and make it clear who they are versus who we are.
Well, Africa's a real continent that's on the rise, extremely young population that's not talked about a lot in many
Absolutely.
conversations. I think it definitely needs to be talked about because that's, a continent where we have to, really get involved there, talk to these countries and really form alliances. And hopefully we do get better about that. I want to get into some audience questions talking about economic issues. You see it on the streets in New York. I see it in New York, Florida, and everywhere in the kitchen sink. There are these problems with poverty, high inflation, high interest rates, rising rents all around New York City in general, but also around the country. Being in Congress, if you're elected, how do you get that under control obviously if the Republicans keep the House in 2024?
Yeah, first and foremost, we have to continue to grow the economy. When you talk about, how can we continue, big defense budgets before it becomes problematic in terms of, our other priorities in the budget. First and foremost, we have to continue to grow the economy. You can't grow the economy with high inflation because it puts a pressure on demand and it keeps people from feeling like they can spend money and they can make investments in their businesses and things like that. So much of that obviously has to do with spending. I think the fight that we saw in Congress about the debt limit was a good thing. I think the debt limit being raised was obviously something that needed to be done, but the fight had, I think, intangible benefits. It sent the signal to the marketplace that there was going to be some sort of accountability on this administration to take seriously spending levels. And so that's one thing that this Republican House of Representatives have provided the American people. To the extent that we can continue that in 2024 by keeping the majority, I think is going to be a benefit for the economy. Sometimes divided government works better, and I think you're seeing that unfold here in terms of inflation. Inflation is beginning to come down. I think so much of that does have to do with the fact that right now in Congress, there is some sort of force that is preventing Democrats from spending more and more and more as their agenda would have them do.
Are you worried about AI? It seems like it's a problem that a lot of people are talking about. There's no real politicians, as far as I know, maybe offhand, Kellen, that are really taking a stab at this issue because it's going to be, I personally believe, a big problem down the road, not that far down the road, with unemployment issues. We talk about big government spending. You start throwing all these people out of jobs on the street, Medicaid, all these social programs are going to go right up in the air as far as spending. What's your take on this? How do we get this under control? Are you worried about it or what?
I'm very worried about it. I believe that we allowed this technology to be open sourced way too soon. I don't think we truly understood the impacts on the job market, and we should have before we allowed this technology to be so pervasive. And obviously, right now, the cat is somewhat out of the bag. The administration is taking steps to rein in some of this technology to create standards around it, but it's going to be very much kind of after the fact solutions. And so if we had an administration that was much, much more proactive in terms of this technology, I think we could have prevented and gotten smarter about just how this technology was going to have an impact on jobs and jobs going forward into the future. And so I think the next step for Congress is to begin to do that work and to begin to understand how this technology is going to impact our ability for workers, for businesses. Certainly, businesses want to make investments in AI to make things more efficient. But we have to understand exactly how that's going to impact jobs because people got to be able to work, just like you said.
You worried about an economic collapse with housing? I've been hearing about Blackstone and BlackRock maybe starting to buy up these homes. We're moving towards a renter society in this country, which could be a problem down the road. If we don't get this rent issue under control as far as pricing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we see it on Long Island vividly. Right now we're seeing the economy improve in the numbers, but we're not seeing it improve in people's lives just yet. And so that's a big distinction that this White House is going to have to grapple with, and I think the Republicans are going to make sure that we highlight in 2024. But look, the economy, when you talk about housing, especially on Long Island, where we don't have enough housing at different levels, in particular, that's having a real impact on people's ability to find housing that suits their family lifestyle right now. And so you have, for example, older people in homes that want to downsize, but they can't downsize because inflation rates are high, and there's no necessarily great apartment or townhome options to go to. And so, but it's also having an effect on those young families that want to move up into a bigger place because they got growing families, and therefore it makes sense for them to be there so they can pay into taxes for local schools and things like that, rather than having grandpa and grandpa in that house paying taxes for local schools and things like that. So we have to do better in terms of a more holistic approach in terms, especially here on Long Island, and creating more housing for people at all income levels, and certainly at all thresholds of different types of housing. So single family, apartments, townhomes, and things like that.
I want to end with some fun questions. Knicks or the Nets?
Ah, I'm gonna go Knicks.
All right,
Knicks.
fair enough.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Jets or Giants?
Yeah,
I'm
I'm gonna
putting you
go
on the
Jets.
spot. I hope you
Yeah,
don't lose voters with this
yeah.
stuff,
I'm
but
I'm gonna go Jets. They got an interesting quarterback situation unfolding right now, and so I'm interested to see what they can do this season.
last question, Rangers or Islanders? Actually, one more after that. I beg to pardon that.
I'm gonna
Rangers
go
or
Islanders.
Islanders?
That's an easy one. Yeah, yeah.
All right, fair enough. And Yankees or Mets? You got to ask that question.
Mets. Yeah,
Wow, very
yeah.
interesting. All right,
It's
we'll roll with
Queens,
that.
Yeah, it's Queens, man. So
No, I respect that. I respect that. A last question. The Republicans have been really struggling to get a lot of young voters. I used to be a very leftist liberal. I was a Bernie Sanders guy. I saw the light throughout COVID with all the mandates and all the gobbledygook nonsense that happened. And I've kind of changed teams due to that and due to many other economic and social issues that have been going on in the past few years, especially. How do we get young people? I'm 34, you're 37, but in general, how do we get young people to vote Republican? It's very tabooed. I don't know if it's a college thing that these kids, when they get into college, they're kind of brainwashed against voting Republican. But, how do we do this? Because we need to do this to get ahead and start, getting very good elected officials back in office.
yeah, you're absolutely right, and it makes a lot of sense for us to be more affirmative about going after young voters. I think for me that starts with running an inclusive campaign. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, or who you love. Our campaign is for you, and we've made that a cornerstone. Every time I go out and talk to voters, I talk about the idea of inclusive conservatism, inclusive republicanism. This is a very diverse district. We have a large population of Asians. We have a large population of Hispanics. We have immigrant communities, particularly in Queens and in northern parts of the district. And so we have to be able to put forward a nominee and a messenger that embodies diversity, that embodies an ability to go out and speak to young people and certainly audiences of all types. And so that's certainly something that we bring to the table. I think to engage young people, you just have to do that. You have to engage them. You have to engage them where they are. They're on TikTok. We're on TikTok too, right? So most Republican candidates are not on TikTok. So we are certainly ensuring that we're reaching young people, we're bringing them into the campaign. We've got a lot of great interns and volunteers that are young and that are enthusiastic and that are ready to knock on doors and just get engaged in the process.
Kellen Curry, again, New-York 3 is running in 2024. Kellen, I believe you're a rising star. Regardless of what happens in this race, we do need more people like you running that are young, energetic, and know, what's going on in the country, basically. So I'm grateful that you came on the program. Last thing, just tell the audience where they can find more about you if they are living in the district or even around New York City in general, how they can get involved in your campaign.
Absolutely. You can go to kellencurry.com. You can find the information from there. I mean, everything that we have on social media can be found there. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on Twitter. Everything is right there. So please go to kellencurry.com, learn more about our campaign. We'd love to talk to you. Love to get your ideas and thoughts about how we can get NY-3 back on track.
Kellen Curry, New York 3rd District. Kellen, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope you'll have me back.